Chapter 18. Moony, Wormtail, and Padfoot. It took seconds for the absurdity for the statement to sink in. Then Ron voiced what Harry was thinking. "You're both mental." "Ridiculous," said Hermione faintly. "Peter Pettigrew's dead," said Harry. "He killed him 12 years ago." He pointed at Black, whose face was twisted convulsively. "I meant to," he growled, his yellow teeth bared. "Little Peter got the better of me. Not this time, though." And Crookshanks was thrown to the floor, and Black lunged at Scabbers. Ron yelled with pain as Black's weight fell on his broken leg. "Sirius, no!" Lupin yelled, launching himself after dragging Black away from Ron again. "Wait! You can't do it just like that. They need to understand. We've got to explain." "We can explain afterwards," snarled Black, trying to throw Lupin off. One hand was still clawing for the air as it tried to reach Scabbers, who was squealing like a little piglet, scratching Ron's face and neck, and as he tried to escape. "They've got a right to know everything," Lupin panted. He's still trying to restrain Black. "Ron's kept him as a pet. There are parts of it I don't even understand. And Harry, Harry, the truth, Sirius." So Black stopped struggling, though his hollowed eyes were still fixed on Scabbers, who was clamped tightly under Ron's bitten, scratched, and bleeding hands. "All right, then," said Black, without taking his eyes off the rat. "Tell him whatever you like, but make it quick, Remus. I want to commit the murder I was imprisoned for." "You're nutters, both of you," said Ron shakily, looking around at Harry and Hermione for support. "I've had enough of this. I'm off." He tried to heave himself on his good leg, but Lupin raised his wand again, pointing it at Scabbers. "You're going to hear me out, Ron," he said quietly. "Just keep a tight hold on Peter while you listen." "He's not Peter, he's Scabbers," Ron yelled, trying to force the rat back into his front pocket, but Scabbers was fighting too hard. Ron swayed, overbalanced Harry caught him and pushed him back down on the bed. Then, ignoring Black, Harry turned to Lupin. "There were witnesses who saw Peter Pettigrew die," he said. "A whole street full of them." "They didn't see what they thought they saw," said Black savagely, still watching Scabbers struggling in Ron's hands. "Everyone saw Sirius kill Peter," Lupin nodding. "I believed it myself until I saw the map tonight, because the Marauder's map never lies. Peter's alive. Ron is holding him, Harry." Harry looked down at Ron, and their eyes met, and they agreed silently that Black and Lupin were both out of their minds. This story made no sense whatsoever. How could Scabbers be Peter Pettigrew? Azkaban must have unhinged Black after all. But why was Lupin playing along with him? Then Hermione spoke in a trembling, would-be calm sort of voice, as though trying to will Professor Lupin to talk sensibly. "But Professor Lupin, Scabbers can't be Peter Pettigrew. It just came true, you know. It can't. Can't be true. It can't be true." "Why can't it be true?" said Lupin calmly, as though they were in class. Hermione had simply spotted a problem in an experiment with Grindylows. Because people would know if Peter Pettigrew had been an animagus." "And did animagi class with Professor McGonagall, and I looked them up when I did my homework. The Ministry of Magic keeps tabs on witches and wizards who can become animals. There's a register showing the animal they become, and their markings and their tidings. And I went and I looked for Professor McGonagall up on the register, and there seems to be only 7 animagi in this century, and Peter Pettigrew's name wasn't on the list." Harry had barely had time to marvel inwardly at the effort Hermione put into her homework when Lupin started to laugh. "Right again, Hermione," he said. But the Ministry of Magic never knows that there used to be 3 unregistered animagi running around the Hogwarts. If you're going to tell them the story, get a move on, Remus, snarled Black, who was still watching Scabbers' every desperate move. I've waited 12 years. I'm not going to wait much longer. All right. But you'll need to help me, Sirius, said Lupin. I only know how it began. Lupin broke off. There had been a loud creak behind him. The bedroom door had opened, and on its own accord, all 5 of them stared at it. Then Lupin strode towards and looked out into the landing. Oh, no one's there. The place is haunted, said Ron. It's not, said Lupin, still looking at the door in a puzzled way. The shrieking shack has never been haunted. The screams and howls the villagers used to hear were made by me. He pushed the graying hair out of his eyes, thought for a moment, and then said, That's where all the stress of my becoming a werewolf. None of this could have happened if I hadn't been bitten, and if I hadn't been so foolhardy. He looked sober and tired. Ron started to interrupt, but Hermione said, Shh. She was watching Lupin intently. I was a very small boy when I received my bite. My parents tried everything, but in those days there was no cure. The potion that Professor Snape has been making me for a very recent discovery. It makes me safe, you see, as long as I take it the week preceding the full moon. I keep my mind on my transformation, and I am able to curl up in my office as a harmless wolf and wait for the moon to wane again. Before the Wolfbane potion was discovered, however, I became a fully fledged monster once a month. It seemed impossible that I would be able to come to Hogwarts. Other parents weren't likely to want their children to be exposed to me. But then Dumbledore became headmaster, and he was sympathetic. He said that as long as we took certain precautions, there was no reason I shouldn't come to school. Lupin sighed and looked directly at Harry. I told you months ago that the Whomping Willow was planted the year I came to Hogwarts. The truth is, it was planted because I came to Hogwarts. This house, Lupin looked miserably around the room, the tunnel that leads to it, they were all built for me, for my use. Once a month, I would smuggle out of the castle into this place to transform. The tree was a place that they used the tunnel to stop anyone else from coming across me while I was dangerous. Harry couldn't see where this story was going, but he was listening raptly. All the same, the only sound apart from Lupin's voice was Scabbers' frightened squeaking. My transformation in those days were terrible. It is very painful to turn into a werewolf. I was separated from humans to bite, so I bit and scratched myself instead. The villagers heard the noises and the screaming and thought they were hearing particularly violent spirits. Dumbledore encouraged the rumor. Even now, when the house has been silent for years, the villagers don't dare approach it. But apart from my transformations, I was happier than I had ever been in my life. For the first time ever, I had friends. 3 good friends, Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and of course, your father, Harry, James Potter. Now my 3 friends could hardly fail to notice I disappeared once a month. I made up all sorts of stories. I told them my mother was ill, that I had to go home to see her. I was terrified that they would desert me the moment they found out what I was. But of course they, like you, Hermione, worked out the truth. And they didn't desert me at all. Instead, they did something for me that would make my transformations only more bearable. But the best times of my life, they became an animagi. My dad, too? Said Harry, astounded. Yes, indeed, said Lupin. It took them the best part of 3 years to work out how to do it. Your father and Sirius were the cleverest students of the school. Lucky they were, because the animagus transformation can go horribly wrong. One reason the ministry keeps a close watch is those attempting to do it. Peter needed all the help he could get from James and Sirius. Finally, in our 5th year, they managed to do it. They could each turn into a different animal at will. But how did that help you? Said Hermione, sounding puzzled. They couldn't keep me company as humans, so they kept me company as animals, said Lupin. A werewolf is only a danger to people. They sneaked out of the castle every month under James' invisibility cloak. They transformed Peter as the smallest could slip between or beneath the willows attacking branches, and touch the knot that freezes it. They would then slip down the tunnel and join me under the influence. I became less dangerous. My body was still wolfish, but my mind seemed to become less so while I was with them. Hurry up, Remus, snarled Black, who was still watching Scabbers with a horrible sort of hunger in his face. I'm getting there, sirs. I'm getting there. Well, highly exciting possibilities were open to us now that we could all transform. Soon we were leaving the shrieking shack and roaming the school grounds and the village by night. Sirius and James transformed into such large animals they were able to keep the werewolf in check. I doubt whether any Hogwarts students ever found out more about the Hogwarts grounds and Hogsmeade than we did. And that's how we became to write the Marauders map and sign it with our nicknames. Sirius is Padfoot, Peter is Wormtail, James is Prongs. And what sort of animal? Harry began, but Hermione cut him off. That's all still really dangerous around in the dark with a werewolf. What if they'd given the others the slip and bitten them, somebody? Oh, I thought that still haunts me, said Lupin heavily. And there were near misses, many of them. We laughed about them afterwards, but we were young and thoughtless, carried away with our own cleverness. I sometimes felt guilty about betraying Dumbledore's trust. Of course, he had admitted me at Hogwarts when no other headmaster would have done so, and he had no idea I was breaking the rules, and he had set down for me and own others' safety. He never knew that I had led 3 fellow students in becoming animagi illegally, but I always managed to forget my guilty feelings every time we sat down to plan our next month's adventure. And that haven't changed. Lupin's face was hardened, and there was a self-disgust in his voice. All this year, I've been battling with myself, wondering whether I should tell Dumbledore that Sirius was an animagus, but I didn't do it. Why? Because I was too cowardly. I would have been meant admitting that I betrayed his trust while I was at school, admitting that I'd led others along with me, and Dumbledore's trust has meant everything to me. He let me into Hogwarts as a boy, and he gave me a job when I had been shunned by all my whole adult life, unable to find paid work because of what I am. And also, I convinced myself that Sirius was getting into the school using the dark arts he learned from Voldemort, and that being an animagus had nothing to do with it. So, in a way, Snape's been right about me all along. Snape? Said Black harshly, taking his eyes off Scabbers for the first time. Minutes looking at Lupin. What's Snape got to do with it? He's here, Sirius, said Lupin heavily. He's teaching here, as well. He looked up at Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Professor Snape was at school with us. He fought very hard against my appointment to the Defense Against Dark Arts job. He has been telling Dumbledore all year that I am not to be trusted. He has his reasons. You see, Sirius here played a trick on him which nearly killed him. A trick that involved me. Black made a derisive noise. It serves him right, he sneered, sneaking around, trying to find out what we were up to, hoping he could get us expelled. Service was very interested in where I went every month, Lupin told Harry, Ron, and Hermione. We were in the same year, you know. We didn't like each other very much. He especially did like James. Jealous, I think, of James' talent on the Quidditch field. Anyway, Snape had seen me crossing the grounds with Madame Pomfrey one evening as she led me towards the Whomping Willow to transform. Sirius thought it would be amusing to tell Snape all he had to do was prod the knot on the tree trunk with a long stick, and he'd be able to get it in after me. Well, of course, Snape tried it. As if he got as far as his house, he'd have met fully grown werewolf. But your father, who heard what Sirius had done, went after Snape and pulled him back, at a risk to his own life. Snape glimpsed at me through the end of the tunnel. He was forbidden by Dumbledore to tell anybody, but from that time on, he knew I was. So that's why Snape doesn't like you, said Harry slowly. Because he thought you were on the joke. That's right, sneered a cold voice in the wall behind Lupin. Severus Snape was pulling off the invisibility cloak, his wand pointing directly at Lupin.